these bishops are menaces to society, and I have almost nowhere for the rook. If I can get both of my rook and my king into the attack, like, it's going to be really hard for him to hold on to this chunk of pawns over here. The king made a journey from e8 to d7, c6, b5, b4, b3, b2. This is one of the worst openings I've ever played, but it's also one of the most beautiful endgames I've ever played. This game had a lot in it, and I'm excited to share it with you. This is round 6 of the U.S. Amateur Team East, and we are playing against Cayman Island Juniors. My opponent plays e4, and I play the Kara Khan. So this, what's really interesting about this team is that they were all kids, of course. They're all teenagers from high school or whatever, and they all had FIDE ratings much higher than the USCF ratings. I don't know about my opponent specifically, but because I'm on board 2, but our board 3 for our team, his opponent had a FIDE rating of 1600, but his USCF was 1000. So we don't know what to expect from these kids because they don't play that many USCF rated tournaments. But anyways, so my opponent plays e4, and after I play c6, he plays knight c3. And that suggests that, okay, he's going to play the 2 knights and do something like this. This is very, very common. But instead of playing knight f3 in this position and going to the 2 knights Kara Khan, he exchanges and then plays d4. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is one of the most harmless ways to play. And actually, I played knight f6, allowing him to transpose into the Jobava London. Let me actually show you what the Jobava London looks like. So if you don't know, it's d4, d5, knight c3, here, and c5, and one of the main moves is e3. And after it takes, we could have the exact same opening as in the actual game. Well, let's see here. Yeah, if bishop f4, then we transpose to the exact same opening. Isn't that interesting? So I was like, okay, I'll play knight f6 and see if he wants to transpose into the Jobava, but he doesn't, which makes sense because he's an e4 player. Why would he? But I guess just for me, like, if he did transpose, that would actually be very beneficial because I know Jobava London theory and what to do against it. So I'd be very happy to see that. But he does play knight f3 though, and I actually had a choice on what I should do. I could develop my bishop out immediately, bishop g4, bishop f5, or knight c6. All of them seem extremely reasonable. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to play knight c6. And here is when it starts to get really, really dicey really, really quickly. He plays the bishop b5, pinning my knight. And once again, I have a choice. But I started to get a little bit scared. For example, so firstly, bishop b5, that usually suggests that, like, he might take my knight, and then I just have the bishop pair, and I'm like, is that relevant here? Usually not. In the Kara Khan, the bishop pair isn't usually relevant. Like, as black, I just want to play bishop g4 and take the knight. And I'll give up my light square bishop for that a lot of times. Like, that's pretty normal. But I was, like, thinking to myself, like, maybe I could have the bishop pair, and that would be kind of nice if he takes my knight on c6, and then I just have this nice light square bishop. So I thought about a move like bishop g4 and h3. I'm like, what if I don't want to give up my light square bishop? Like, I don't have to get rid of it. But if I do go back, then g4, and then knight e5, and if if rook c8, for example, then it could get kind of scary with h4. And where does my bishop go? If I ever go h6, then this is a big damage to my kingside structure, and I have this this backwards e pawn. So it's kind of scary if I do this. And even if I go queen c7, I was also kind of scared of g5. After I was analyzing this game with some other people, and we actually figured out that if g5, removing a defender of the d5 pawn, this might actually be totally fine, because if white takes, then we give a check. And I just realized this. Oh my gosh, there's a fork hanging here. Oh yeah, that's bad. This is bad. For example, bishop here, and then if we do trade everything off, we're just down a pawn, and this fork is being threatened. Yeah, this is not good. This is bad news bears, actually. Okay. I actually thought we actually analyzed this position wrong. Queen a5 check. If white does voluntarily drop the bishop, there's this fork on c7 with the king and the queen. Okay, well, I'm glad I didn't do that then. But yeah, so I was scared of this, something like this. And I was like, do I really have to take the knight? I think it's totally fine for black. Like, this position, definitely totally fine. There is nothing wrong with this position for black. But I was like, what if I just don't do that? What if I play bishop f5 instead? And if knight e5, I'll just go rook c8. And that's what happened. This is the actual game. And so I said this is where it gets dicey, but now here is where it actually does. Bishop f4. And I start seeing some, I don't want to say ghosts, but I start thinking about the wrong things. Like, I think e6, I was kind of scared of g4. And once again, I was like, oh man, like bishop g6 and h4. And I'm like, this looks extremely unpleasant. Like, now with the bishop on f4, it really does look like a Jobava, especially with the g4 h4 pushes. Like, this is bad news bears. Um, so I was really scared of that, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna play a very simple move. I'm just gonna play a6, and now it attacks the bishop, and after he takes, I take, and and now it's this whole position is gonna be less scary. I haven't committed my pawn to e6 yet, so now if g4, I can just move back to e6 or d7 if I want to. That's an option for me. So I thought, okay, a6 is a pretty good move because it does do that, and I fell for one of the most elementary opening tactics, and I can't believe I've never seen this. It's knight takes c6, an in-between move, and it just attacks the queen, and if I take the bishop, I lose my queen, and if I take the knight with the pawn, well, I just lost a pawn. But more than that, I lost a second pawn because look at these bishops. Like, these bishops are menaces to society, and I have almost nowhere for the rook. Because rook a8, bishop b7, and then rook a7, and there's no way for me to defend this pawn, of course. Like, the geometry, this is very important geometry to remember if you've never seen this pattern before, where a bishop attacks a rook and attacks the pawn at the same time, and the rook has no way to defend the pawn. Very common pattern, actually. And he just wins 2 pawns. But not only that, because after he gives a check and I block with the knight or the bishop, he can win a third pawn if he really wants to. Like, he really could just win a third pawn. And I don't understand why he didn't. I don't know what he didn't like about it. Maybe, I don't even know. Like, maybe he forgot his knight goes to c3. I'm not really sure. But, I mean, being up 3 pawns just looks nice. Even if you have to give up one of them, like, you still got 3 more pawns. So, 3 connected passers on move 15. That would be crazy. But instead, he just decides to trade bishops, which makes sense. I mean, you're up 2 pawns, might as well trade material, sure. And he castles, and I play e6. So at this point, I'm absolutely terrified, mortified, sad, angry, because, like, dude, this guy's literally 1,000. He's 1,098. Like, he's 1,100. Sure, okay, fine. And I literally just blundered 2 pawns against him in the opening. I have no idea how strong he really is. What's his FIDE rating? Like, am I just gonna get crushed? Like, this is horrible. I can't believe I'm losing for my team. Why is this all happening? So I was pretty distraught here, but I just gotta play chess, so develop pieces, and I know what I was like. You know what? Like, in the Benko Gambit, Black is down a pawn, maybe 2 pawns. I never played the Benko Gambit before, but now I have these open B and A files, and I can like attack White's pawns, and maybe White's pawns won't be that easy to defend. And so it's not like I was hopeless, but it definitely wasn't pleasant. That's for sure. My opponent plays Queen D3, connecting the rooks, which makes a lot of sense, and preparing Queen B5. And I play Rook B7, preventing Queen B5, which would force a queen trade. And I'm also targeting the B pawn, and it just seemed like a very forced move in this position. So I play Bishop E7. Oh, he plays Queen A6, and I'm not going to take this pawn. I will not. I will not take this pawn because, for example, Rook B1, and let's say I take. Bishop here, everything is bad. I don't even know what you play in this position. Um, Rook b1 maybe. And if bishop d8, does white get out of it actually? I remember thinking to myself white didn't get out of it. Or black couldn't get out of it. But maybe it's actually okay. Did white rush anything here? Rook b2 first. Rook b2 first. And rook b2 first, and black is busted. The queen has nowhere to go. If you go here, we just win the queen. So yeah, so I'm not going to take this b pawn. I'm just not going to take it because I still haven't gotten the rest of my pieces into the game. Always develop your pieces. So I go bishop e7. So now if queen a8, I can block with the bishop. And life isn't that bad. But he decides to go queen a4. So it's very interesting. My opponent rushes as fast as he can to trade pieces, but he gives up one of his pawns because after queen takes and knight takes, rook b4 is a four Karunos. And, you know, like, I get one of my pawn back. That's cool. He ends up playing b3, and then I take this d pawn. Knight c3, then you do lose your connected passers. But with b3, your pawns are still connected, protected past pawns, which is very nice. So I think b3 makes a lot of sense. And he speed runs for another trade after playing bishop e3, attacking my rook. My rook doesn't have any good infiltration squares deeper into the white position, so I end up going bishop or rook b4. And he's, like I said it before, he speed runs for another trade. But this allows me to do a bit of a fancy move, which is rook takes a4, trading on my terms. And this was a big decision point because I had to like really calculate and figure out which position was more drawable. That's where my brain was headed because I'm just down two pawns. Like, which position am I more likely to be able to hold? And I had a tough time deciding. Well, of course, if rook takes, pawn takes, and bishop takes, of course, this is very, very good for me. Very, very good for me. But he's not going to do that. He's going to take the bishop here. And if I go rook a7, he could take the knight. Or he could keep the minor pieces on and say, hey, my bishop is better than your knight. And I had to try to figure out, is his bishop really better than my knight? And I ended up deciding, no, not really. It's not clear. I do have knight e4, and I have king d7. I can bring my rooks in. It's still going to be hard for him to defend all of his pawns. Plus, I don't really have that much of an option compared to my other option. My other option it's to take the bishop, and the knight goes in, and I'm like, are my chances really better here than the other position? It was a tough call because in both positions I'm down two pawns and life sucks, and chess is hard. So I ended up deciding rook takes a4 was the way to go, because I just felt like my knight, if he doesn't trade knight for bishop, I felt like my chances are I have a non-zero chance to hold this, and I also had a feeling that he would probably trade because he's been speed running for trades so far. So most likely we'd get into this rook endgame. And yeah, I'm definitely losing, but it's not so easy for him. If he rushes with the pawn pushes, my king is closer to these pawns. So there could be, I could definitely foresee that, if I can get both of my rook and my king into the attack, it's going to be really hard for him to hold on to this chunk of pawns over here. So after I take on f6, he plays a4, chugging along. I'm not sure if he really had to do that. He could have been a bit more patient. Maybe he could play rook c1 to prepare c4, maybe. Or maybe, play f3 and bring his king in. These are all options. But probably a4. There's nothing probably super wrong about that. It does give me time to start moving my king over, though. Which, I mean, white can't stop that, but, it is what it is. And my opponent plays rook f d1, pinning the pawn to my king. And if I just play a lazy move, like rook h8, for example, c4 is really, really annoying. And that's what, and I was really, really scared um, because I didn't know what to do. And I was really, at first, my instinct was, oh, well, of course, king c6 is the most natural move. Bring your king towards the passed pawns. The king is one of the best blockading pieces. Rooks and queens are the worst blockading pieces, but kings are great. Kings are absolutely great. And of course, pawns are the best blockading pieces, of course. But sometimes, in this case, there are no pawns on this file. So yes, my king would be great to blockade the passed pawns. But I was really worried because if he plays c4, then after takes he has rook ac1, and I was like, oh, this looks really uncomfortable. Like, where is my king going? And I actually foresaw that, like, oh man, imagine rook king here, rook takes, and something like king a5. I was like, is this really okay for me? Like, am I really doing okay? Like, maybe you can even go rook d4 and then check here. Like, it didn't look very pleasant. My king's off on the center, and maybe rook d4 isn't even the best move, but this looked kind of scary for me, and I didn't like the looks of it. So I was very, very scared to put my king on c6, and I was considering going king e7. I actually calculated this for a while, and I was like, I cannot justify this position. Like, if I play king e7, that's an admission that I'm going to lose this game. Like, just straight up. Like, I wasted time going king d7, king e7, and like he can just like start rolling his pawns. Why not? Although maybe he doesn't rush because I still have rook a5, and he has to be careful with how he pushes his pawns. Maybe, but I mean, since I waste so many moves, like he's gonna have more time to bring in his own king and support his pawn pushes. So I could not justify king e7, and king c6 scared me, but then I started calculating even more, and after c4, I determined I can probably play king c5. And if he takes and I take and goes for rook checks, the difference is that my king gets super active. And I wasn't sure if I was going to go for this, but I determined the alternatives were worse. I determined the alternatives were worse. I mean, and here it still looks scary because my king is being absolutely mauled to death, but maybe it's okay. I mean, visually, look how amazing this king's journey has been all the way to the a2 square. Uh, I thought, like, okay, this could happen, but I also don't have to go king before. I could run my king back, and then he can never push his pawn because the a pawn would be hanging, and I could bring my other rook in, but I have a lot of isolated pawns. But yeah, I thought this could happen. Something like this could happen, and I thought, okay, I'll make my final decision once I reach this position. But I don't really have that many choices. So I played king c6 because I had to, and then he really surprises me with the move b4. This has got to be a mistake, not the way you play, because now rook ha8, and you can't guard the pawn. The only way to guard it is by pushing it. But by pushing it, these pawns side by side, they really block out any piece from blockading. Like they really do. They create this invincible wall. But by pushing it, now there's holes in the defense, and I can blockade with the king, and I'm attacking this pawn, and it's very, very hard to defend. And actually, I'm gonna go one step further and say it's impossible to defend all of your pawns. And I think black is either close to equal or slightly worse, which is amazing. I mean, just think about it. This, visually speaking, I brought my king in. My opponent did not. Like, straight up. Like my king has made 4 consecutive moves, and his king is just, chilling over there in the corner. And I think that's where his real mistake lied in. Like, for example, instead of a4, if you went, like, let's say rook c1 maybe, king d7, king f1, king c6, king e2, and maybe a4 now. Well, let's say I do attack it. Whenever I ever attack this a pawn, he can always push now. And let's say I go here, and he goes here, and there's no way for me to really go further in my advance. And the king and rook guard the c pawn very well. So really, and like if I ever go rook g8, think just play g3 very simply. So really, I mean, if he just brings his king in, the game's over. The game's over. Like, I'm donezo's. I'm cooked. Like everything's gone. But the thing is, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. And I just walk mosey on my king over, and bam, like it's equal. Like I think it's either, like I said, close to. Actually, I'll check. I'll turn on the engine right now just for this one move. It's been off this entire time, and the evaluation is still +1. Okay, still +1. But okay, I'll turn the engine back off. But like blundering 2 pawns out of the opening and feeling miserable. This is all I could hope for in the world. This is all I could hope for. This is awesome. So he ends up playing a bit more passively with Rook D4. Um, and I just, so he defends the pawn, but now I have enough time to just attack this pawn. And he still can't push the A pawn because it's adequately defended by my king and rook, the A6 square. And I'm threatening this pawn, and how are you going to defend it? Okay, rook A2, sure, because this rook can't defend it or else it'll be overloaded. So yeah, rook A2, sure. Well, now just rook A C8. And there's no possible tactics about promotion because this is just checkmate. So there's back rank mate issues if you do end up going here. If you do end up going A6, I mean. But instead of that, he just defends passively with rook D2. So he goes rook D2, and that leaves the B4 pawn hanging. And I was calculating here, like before taking the pawn, like if I take, does he have anything crazy? Am I falling into anything? Can he push? I'm not really concerned if he pushes, because if he does, worst case scenario, I was thinking of something like this, King B5, for example. Um, and I was a little bit concerned because, for example, something like Rook B2, and if I take, let's say this Rook was on D1, like he could do checkmate, ladder checkmate out of nowhere. But because of the fact that the Rooks were on the same file, he doesn't have enough time to do a ladder checkmate because I can just defend myself. But it was kind of scary because if I get lazy, like, hello, you just got deaded. You just got killed. So it did kind of concern me, A6. But after calculating it out, I realized, okay, I should be fine just to play King B5. And if he keeps running, then I stop it, and there's no way for him to defend this A7 pawn. So A6 is not a concern. And if Rook B2 immediately, I have this really funny move, King C2, which King C3, which is just a fork, a king fork, and it's beautiful. It is such a beautiful fork. I just gotta clap to that one. That was awesome. That is an awesome fork. But he wouldn't blunder that. But he does just play a move I do not understand, C3 check. And I was like, this move literally does nothing. And I was trying to figure out what his idea was, and I was just like, okay, if I take with the king, then his passed pawn is a bit closer, harder to defend, and my king doesn't have any safe squares, really. I have to walk my king back, and I was like, but if I just take with the rook, it's like, is there a threat? Like, I have to be careful after a move like a6, and because deflection tactics like almost work. Like if this rook couldn't block, then I would have to go here, and then he would win a rook. But like it doesn't even work because I have rook c4. But then he could do something like this: takes, and promote with a check. So there were tactics like that I had to be aware of. But then I was like, if a6, I can always just checkmate him. That's always an option. So I wasn't too scared after I thought about it for a while. And he played rook db2 check. I just blocked. And now I'm playing backhand checkmate. And I'm, if he defends against it with one of his rooks, he hangs the other rook. And yeah, I mean, this position is just winning at this point. Because after he takes and I take, he plays rook a1, the only move putting the rook out of danger and defending the back rank, and I play king b2. And I just want you to like think about this position for a second. The king made a journey. from e8 to d7, c6, b5, b4, b3, b2. And look at this king. What did this king ever do? Nothing. Like, so this is probably an exemplary game of king activity in the end game. The king is an attacking piece, and this is one of the most beautiful demonstrations of it. And like I said, one of the worst openings I've ever played in my life. It was so bad. I can't believe I fell for that trap. But yeah, king b2. And he plays rook e1. He has to keep guard of the back rank to avoid checkmate. And now I play rook a8, and I'm simply going to collect this pawn, and there's nothing he can do. He checks me, but I just go up one square. I don't go to c3 because that would allow him to defend his a pawn. So I stay on the b file, and he can't defend his a pawn. He checks me again. I go b4, attacking this pawn, and he makes his very first king move. I've made 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I made 9 king moves. This is his very first king move. And I take the pawn. One last trick for white is, white would be winning if king takes pawn because of the skewer winning a rook. So that was one last trick, but I take with the rook, the correct way to take, and I simply have a pass pawn, and there's nothing he can do. He tries to create counterplay by targeting the h pawn, and I can't defend it. And I just played d4. He takes the pawn, but now, checkmate is unstoppable because this rook is really misplaced on h7. It can't even go back behind the king to give checks because of this f7 pawn that's in its way. And I just play d3, threatening checkmate in 1. He goes king e1. I go king c3, and I'm re-threatening checkmate. So he goes f4, but now I go check. And the king cannot go here because check here, and I promote with a check defended by the rook, and it's going to be checkmate very, very shortly. And, if he goes here, I'm still going to go king c2. And once again, this rook is doing absolutely nothing on the h7 square. And so in this position, after d2 check, my opponent resigns. Yeah, it's kind of an amazing thing to see. It definitely felt like he played like a 1000 in the end game. In the opening, so maybe 1000 USCF is accurate for his rating, but man, that was bad from me. Like, I cannot be blundering 2 pawns in the opening. It's bad. It's bad. I can't believe I've never seen that tactic before. That opening tactic. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said it's a very common trap in the London, and I never knew that, but now I know, and I will not blunder that again. I will not blunder that ever, ever, ever again. Never again. But yeah, that was an interesting game. And actually, one thing I really want to look at with the engine here is what was the best way for him to defend. Because we saw the worst way for him to defend, which was what happened in the game. And let's see here. So where did he start losing his advantage? Firstly, I want to see what the engine thinks about this position. A4 is the best move. I guess that makes sense because you'd never have to worry about defending the A pawn. And FD1. So yep, this is good. And here, I'm pretty sure he had to play. Yep, he had to play c4. C4, by far the best move in this position. But maybe he didn't see after c takes rook c8 or rook c1. Maybe that's what he missed. Like, honestly, that definitely could be what he missed. Because if you take with the pawn, then it's like, man, this is not good. This is not what white wants at all. So maybe that's what he missed. I'm trying to think of what other things he could have missed. Like, I probably would have played king c5 here or something like this. Yeah, c takes b4. Wow. Because if king takes... Oh, rook takes d5, and the king is still misplaced on the edge of the board. That makes sense. That makes sense. So, yeah, this makes sense. This is the critical way that he had to play. And because he didn't, though, I played b4. Yeah, the advantage goes from +3 to +1. And that gives me time to go rook ha8, a5, and I blockade. He's still better here, but the move is c3. That's the way he defends, because now if rook c7, rook d3, and a rook, if I double up here, then he can go rook a3. and now this D rook is not overloaded. And what happened in the game was that he never played C3 immediately, went here, but then after I doubled rooks, this D rook is overloaded, and there's nothing he can really do to defend all of his pawns. And here the position is equal. The position is equal, which makes sense because I'm going to win one of the pawns. I'm down a pawn, and I'm going to win one of them back. So it feels like I'm down 2 pawns because these pawns are doubled, and he has 2 connected passers. But no, yeah, actually I'm only down 1 pawn, which is I keep forgetting I'm only down 1 pawn in this position. But yeah, so it worked out for me. Um, Let me see if there's anything he could have done. No, here, no, yeah, this position is already back to equal. Yeah, C3 was his last chance to claim an advantage because he doesn't lose any pawns. But he messes it up. And from here, now it's just my game. It's my game now. Um, and let's see, the main move was rook d2. And I took. And yeah, c3 was probably the last blunder. It's yeah, black has a slight edge. I'm not sure why black isn't just straight up winning with best defense. Um, yeah, I guess rook b3, g4. That's what the computer wants to get the king more active, I guess. Limit black's pawns from moving. Keep both rooks on, and you should have sufficient counterplay to maybe hold. And you still have this past a pawn for black to worry about. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, like maybe white can hold with perfect play like this. But instead, he trades rooks, and now it went from uh, black slightly better to black just straight up winning now, and there's nothing white can do. And yeah, so that was the only part that I was curious about. You know, what should I do? What should he have done to keep his advantage? And I also want to look at the opening a little bit. Rook c8. I bet bishop f5 was bad. Yeah, bishop g4 is the best move, and I'm supposed to just take the bishop and play e6, and life is good. Instead of that, though, I play badly. I play bishop f5, and this position is slightly better. Yeah, bishop f5 isn't an accuracy because now knight e5, rook c8, and what he played, bishop f4. So yeah, and this makes a lot of sense. And of course, I absolutely just blunder straight off the bat, and it's +2 right out of the opening because a6 is an absolutely horrible blunder. So I learned a lot from that game. Hopefully, you learned a lot too. I'm gonna turn on the game review, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.